light bulb. It was a huge breakthrough. Humans depend on sight. I'm using visuals for you to better understand this speech. This is the polar bear. It is the main predator of the Arctic, keeping the food chain intact since all animals are connected. Wouldn't it be nice if to be a contributing member of society, all you'd have to do is eat? Advancing society involves more technology, but sustainability is another factor, which is using natural resources responsibly so all organisms can thrive, future and present. Humans depend on electricity and Arctic animals, but electricity is making life harder for these animals. How? Natural resources aren't being used responsibly to create electricity, and this is causing a huge problem. Climate change. Today, let's examine what causes climate change, its impacts, how electricity is produced in developed and developing countries, and finally, how we can continue to reduce the influence of climate change for the future. First, you should understand what climate change is. Climate change is the change in Earth's usual temperature. It is a global warming. Fossil fuels, natural resources created from fossils of dead organisms, are being used to power electricity. As a result, carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere, a greenhouse gas, which traps heat, increasing the temperature of the Earth. This model shows that more heat is being transmitted to Earth than is being reflected, and that is due to greenhouse gases trapping the heat. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, 27% of greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. are caused by electricity usage. Of those, about a third are from residential and commercial buildings, which makes sense. Electricity is used to turn on lights. We're not in dark ages anymore. It's also used to heat up your water so you can take hour-long showers and have your concerts there. Most of the greenhouse gases from electricity are from coal being burned as a power source. In developing countries, most notably India and China, there is a dependence on coal to generate cheap electricity for economic growth. Coal has a purpose behind being just a stocking stuffer for the children on Santa's naughty list. In the year 2000, 2/3 of developing Asia had electricity. 2/3 of the progress has been made in India, with over 99% of the population having access in 2019, thanks to the Sabakya scheme, which made electricity inexpensive to Indian households that were missing it. Most of their power came from coal, the cheapest source. They are the world's #2 user in coal, but it has improved the lives of many Indians, whereas the United States is at an economic advantage where it can use other supplies for electricity, yet there's continued use of fossil fuels. Across Africa, there's a huge inaccess of electricity. Many hospitals and clinics don't have access to reliable electricity, and this causes some big issues. For example, it leads to medicine spoiling, lack of lighting to see clearly for operations, and the inability to use crucial medical devices. Healthcare is just one example of an industry that would be improved with electricity. In 2015, 92.7% of South Africa's electricity came from coal sources, according to the World Bank. 95% of South Africa has electricity, making it one of the most developed countries in Africa. This exemplifies the positive impact coal can have, besides for barbecuing. Most of Africa, though, doesn't have this level of electricity. Only 43% of the continent, compared to the world's 87%, has electricity access. The demand for power will continue to grow due to Africa's high population growth rate. Like how Niger has a total fertility rate of 7 children per woman, whereas the US is less than 2. If it doesn't receive help from more economically advanced countries, Africa will have to continue to use fossil fuels for power. Thanks, dinosaurs. Now, shedding some light on the subject, electricity usage contributes to our carbon footprint, which is the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere due to human activities. 2.57 million pounds of carbon dioxide are released into the atmosphere in a second. Globally, levels have surpassed 400 parts per million of CO2, where a safe level is 350 parts per million. Methane levels as well are skyrocketing, and this is due to manure Those stinky stockyards in the Midwest are contributing to greenhouse gas emissions as well. Well, all of this exhibits that there are too many greenhouse gases, but what does this really mean for the planet? First, it constitutes it heating up, which it has by 1.8 degrees since now in the 1600s. While this may seem like a minuscule amount, a small change makes a difference. It's like how 32 degrees and lower is the temperature for there to be snow. If it is even a degree higher, there's no snow. The Earth, though, is a much larger scale, so a small change will cause some major repercussions. When ice gets too hot, it will melt. This is happening in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Polar bears depend on the ice due to their high level of fat. Their main food source is seals, which would die without ice. When the ice melts and they die, it's going to cause the polar bears to have to depend on other food sources, like Arctic foxes. They'll eventually exhaust their food supply, and they themselves will starve. The herbivore population would have the chance to increase since there are no predators hunting it, but then it would eat all its vegetation and have to either move habitats or starve. A lot of marine animals depend on the ice as well, like walruses. If they went extinct, the fish population would increase since there are no predators, but then they would eat up all their vegetation or smaller fish, and then they would starve because they didn't have any more food left. This eventually trickles down to land animals near the coast, which depend on marine animals for their food supply, and then they would die too. Our food supply would eventually get corrupted. Other issues are more prevalent, like extreme weather events. This is natural disasters like hurricanes and floods and tsunamis. This hurts people living near the coasts and their economies, which we know is detrimental due to having experienced the pandemic. This leads to lives lost, jobs lost, and more money having to be spent in these areas. With reducing carbon emissions from electricity, developed countries are able to use less fossil fuels than developing countries, especially South Africa, which depends on them. The U.S. is already taking steps toward being greener to produce electricity. They're using more renewable sources rather than fossil fuels to generate electricity. One example is turning off lights when you leave a room. This is an example of increased energy efficiency, which is reducing electricity for the same task, which makes energy more efficient. You can also take shorter showers and save your concerts for somewhere else, and turn off the water when you're brushing your teeth. See, not all hope has been lost. Polar bears are still roaming the Arctic, and penguins are ice skating with Santa. Oh wait, that's in the South Pole. Well, both poles are being affected, but not to an immediately pressing level. It is a sign of impending climate change which could affect the rest of the planet if we don't soon take action. Fossil fuels have been so helpful in bringing light to this world, literally. On the flip side, though, they've caused global warming, which produces unnatural natural disasters, hurts Arctic environments, the effects which eventually go full circle and negatively affect us here and now. We in developed countries who are able to save a little energy here and there can reverse the curse of climate change if we only open our eyes to the world's problems instead of our own and stay informed. Thank you.